About 10 years ago, just about this time of the year, I had started the Libertarian Party Pierce St. Croix, and I had discovered disclosure was coming, and I began shorting markets again and watching my silver plummet in value as my family began to go bankrupt. Last night, I finished basic research on Mars. And so 10 years after I began the bankruptcy process, which is to say I began losing all the money, all the assets, I had no idea that 10 years later I would be in a place where I'm doing a project on how the planet Mars was not only formed, but how it eventually failed. So why am I doing these videos? I don't know. But I'm going to keep going. I'm going to power through this part because it's hard to think about these things. It's a difficult time. But you know, there were two things that I did during this period that I really want to talk about, because at the time it just seemed the right thing to do. The first one was that I began researching in the consciousness area, but also in particular, I began looking at psychedelic science. And I very quickly came to realize that what these folks were doing was would probably best described as paradigm-changing work. And that was interesting to me because I was in the midst of doing paradigm-changing work. And so as 2013 went on, I got to the fall of 2013, and I had been active in the Libertarian Party of Wisconsin. And I had taken the time to sort of update them, because what I had found is I'd found a group of, well-intentioned Republicans, mostly, who were free market Republicans and tepid, if you will, or what we call small L libertarians. There were some real libertarians in the party. They were not liked. And the hero of the party, just in the previous 2010 election, 2010 election, had been the spoiler of Tommy Thompson's brother. And Tommy Thompson had been the governor of Wisconsin. And his brother ran for governor in 2010. And he did so because the tavern league made it illegal to do poker machines or some shit like this. Pissed him off. And so he got 10% of the vote. And he was one of the primary reasons that Scott McCallum failed. 4 years later, I would be running. But in that fall of 2013, I actually went to the party in November, and I said, look, I'm going to pitch you guys a campaign plan, because I don't think you're doing this right. I think we need to take a bigger view on this. And the prevailing plan had been, we're going to run 5 people across the entire state. That was the plan. And we're going to run for governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, treasurer, and attorney general. And my plan, instead, was we're going to run as many candidates as we can across the board. And we did. And I'll get to that story later. But I pitched that in November of 2013. And at this time in Wisconsin, and actually across America, we were dealing with a heroin epidemic. And I have videos out there. Maybe I'll probably post it under critical history. But we have a heroin epidemic. And people were dying. There were a lot of overdoses happening in Wisconsin. And the state of Wisconsin had introduced what they called the Hope Bills. And the Hope Bills had 4 basic premises, and you can look them up if you'd like. But they had done a listening session. They had set up a listening session, I believe it was in January 2014, maybe it was the fall of 2013, or December 2013. But they put together a listening session. You know, they wanted to have people come listen to their comments on the Hope Bill. And I learned a lesson there that I'll share later. The lesson is that if you want to speak, try and speak as close to last as you possibly can. And before that, do a good job listening. And I spoke early, but I did bring up that we had a research study done on the use of ibogaine in combination with ketamine to treat opioid addiction. And the early success rates were 56%. Off the charts. And I handed a copy to the listening session. And what's important about this story is what happened just before that. You see, I'd been planning to go, and I made my plan known on my blogs. And so the Libertarian Party had a meeting up at Bar in Burkhardt, and my state assemblyman, Dean Knudsen, showed up. Now, I'll acknowledge I'd been drinking. We all get a little tipsy at the meeting because we're just talking politics and bullshitting. But Dean came in, as I looked at it later, with the specific purpose to deter me from coming to the listening session. And in particular, I had sent him the study on treatment for opioid addiction. And he came and he said, you know, maybe what you should do, Bob, is you should send this to this guy from up north, who's actually the chair of the healthcare committee. Why don't you send this up to him, and he'll really be the guy that you'll deal with on this? I said no. This guy was my former veterinarian. He's a medical professional. He's a bright gent. And I had sent him a fucking study, saving lives. And he showed up at the meeting, trying to head me off from showing up at the listening session. I was so angry over that interaction that I went home and I did something quite unexpected in the big picture. I wrote a letter to the editor of the local newspaper in River Falls, a gentleman who had done the front page story about the brand new caucus in River Falls Journal. And in that letter, I told him how upset I was at Dean's appearance and dismissal, and the fact that everyone who claimed to know what to do in the situation was clueless, and people were going to continue to die. And it wasn't that there wasn't value in the Hope Bills. But one of the bills, for example, says that police, if they show up at an overdose, can now administer Narcan. Why the fuck do I need a government official to tell a police officer that they can administer Narcan? People are dying because you crazy bastards think your control provides an efficacy of positive benefit to society. And it doesn't. Because police should have had access to Narcan and training from the hospitals from the very beginning. We shouldn't wait 6, 8, 10 months and a year for the police to have permission. Your permission is admittance that they should have had it the whole time. And in that letter, I told him that what was coming was not an economic collapse, but I had identified that what was coming was disclosure of the extraterrestrial phenomenon, that these two had to go hand in hand. And that while I was far from the only person in the state of Wisconsin who believed and knew and understood that an economic collapse was coming, I am the only person in Wisconsin who is predicting that with that comes disclosure. I delivered it with a CD, I believe some other materials. And in that letter was a lot of fear, because I was still focused on all of the bad things that I thought just an economic crash brought. I have a lot more hope now. But as I get ready to tell you about 2014, 2015, 2016, a picture will begin to emerge. A picture that says, hey, you may have been doing some things that you didn't expect to do for some reasons you didn't expect to have. And if I'm crazy, if I'm completely wrong, then somehow solving Mars last night will make even less sense. It is. It's my hope, if nothing, that these videos help me to know myself, to know what I'm capable of, even when I don't know that I'm capable of it. Because there is a beautiful plan, and it's waiting for you. It's waiting for me. It's waiting for all of us. And someday, it'll help us all spread hope like fire. Peace.